in my career. One was 2005. And in 2005, something very interesting happened. I moved from owning a pager to getting a mobile device. And for me, that was a big game-changing moment because at that point of time, I don't know how many of you remember, there was something called the Monsoon Hangama offer from Reliance Communications, where you got a phone for 100 rupees and it was free incoming for life, right? And that changed things. What it changed was India became the lowest cost voice country in the world. And today the cost of voice of making any call is some $0.001 per minute. Right? Now what that led to was India having 1.3 billion cell phones today, or 1.2 billion cell phones today on a population of about 1.25 billion Indians, right? So there was a shift that took place. So when you think about the world today and the basic necessities of Indians, whether it used to be food, clothing and shelter, or roti, kapra and makan. It today is, roti, kapra, makan and mobile. Right? Because the most owned single commodity by an Indian prior to the mobile device was actually a wristwatch. And that's been overtaken by mobile. So that was the big first fundamental shift that happened. But when you think about voice as an industry, or the telecom industry, voice is a demand-constrained industry. No matter what you do, whether you're a teenager or whether you're old, the average Indian cannot consume more than 400 minutes a month of calling talk time. It just is the average. You may go up to 600, you may come down to 300, right? So it is a demand-constrained market, whereas data has traditionally been a supply-constrained market, right? And that's where the big shift happened for us 6 months ago. Now 6 months ago, with the coming of Geo, or the Geo effect, what we saw was astounding. So we saw more than 450 million Indians get onto the internet. And that was mind-boggling because 94 to 95% of them came through mobile only. And data, or mobile data, became the cost of arbitrage, right? It became literally the cheapest commodity in the world in terms of 50 rupees a GB. So today we're the cheapest data country in the world. What happened to voice in 2005 happened to data in 2016, right? Now here's a funny story. I moved into an apartment where a friend of mine who's sitting in the audience also lives, and we moved there about a year ago. About 8 months ago actually, 9 months ago. And I was listening to this conversation that my wife was having with someone whom we were trying to hire as a domestic help, okay? And I'm not going to stereotype this in any way. All I can tell you is I take all the important decisions in our house, right? My wife takes all the unimportant ones. I just decide whether we go to war or whether we sign the CTBT treaty, and every single other decision is hers, right? But in a lighter way, and I was hearing this conversation with this lady who was the help, and she was negotiating, the price for what she deemed were the rightful wage for her services. And my wife was lowballing the number, she was highballing the number. Ultimately they agreed, but the terms of the agreement were that when she's at home for 3 to 4 hours, she gets access to our data router, right? And data was arbitrage. In the recent UP elections, which is the largest, most populous state in India, data was again used as arbitrage, in terms of buying voter confidence. So data kind of has become the new oil. And in the last 6 months, India, surprisingly, has consumed 1 billion GB of data per month. That is 40% higher than the US, 60% higher than China, 75% higher than Korea, where Korea has 99% broadband penetration and data penetration, right? Now, the interesting part is, think of an India in 2020. In 2020, the country, or the various pundits have predicted we would have about 750 million Indians on the internet. I would say that by 2025, which is 8 years from now, we're going to have 1.3 billion people on the internet. Or every Indian is going to be connected. Because what the telcos are doing really smartly is introducing devices which are basic feature phone devices coupled with data using VoLTE technology and other Qualcomm chips that allow now a data device to be sold at 500 rupees. In fact, I would argue they don't need to sell those devices at all. because the cost of acquisition for a user in the telecom world is 800 rupees. That device is going to be cheaper. So why not give it away for free? And lock the consumer to that SIM card. So he or she can't switch. So now what it tells you is voice, free, 1.3 billion cell phones. Data, arbitrage, we're going to have 1.3 billion people on the internet in India in 2025. That's a prediction. I don't know if you're recording this, but someday if I come back to Melt in 2025, I'd love to corroborate numbers. Now that's the backdrop, right, in terms of what's happening. So when you think about this, with 1.3 billion people getting access to the internet, the World Bank actually predicts that if 75% of rural India were to get access to the internet, that would create over $200 billion worth of economic impact to the country. Because it's true, every time you connect the unconnected or the underprivileged, you give them access. You give them access to financial services, to education, to healthcare, to jobs, to information. You uplift a society. You ultimately uplift a nation, right? And that's the backdrop. So as marketers in the room or marketing professionals in the room, that's the backdrop with what I'm seeing today happen in the industry. Now when you think about this backdrop and you correlate it to a very interesting theory of disruptive innovation that Clay Christensen really talked about, right? And that was a very simple theory. He said, you know, a disruptor is going to come in with a low-cost product, very low quality, bottom of the pyramid, and slowly going to make his way up. And that's going to disrupt industries. And we felt that it was only possible in the physical world. So the great example that he quotes in his book is the US steel industry. You've all heard the example. In 1975 to 2000, there were these big, massive, behemoth mega steel mills. There came in this disruptor called Nucor with an integrated mini mill producing low quality steel. Over 10 years, the quality became better and cheaper. And the top 10 steel manufacturers in the world in the year 2000, 17 years later, do not exist. They've shut shop, right? And you could argue that's what's happening in digital today. So when you think about what Amazon is doing, and it's a company that I really admire, you know, it gives you every single SKU that Walmart provides you today, the largest retailer in the world. But it came in with books, it went to electronics, and it's boom, it's disrupted everything else. How many of you have booked a holiday on Airbnb in the last 1 year? That's 90% of the room. How many of you booked a holiday on Airbnb 5 years ago? Two people. What changed? When Airbnb launched, it came in as a product which was bed and breakfast, right? So you got maybe couch surfing, maybe, you know, lower end rooms, and the audience here probably wanted to stay in a fancier hotel or, you know, in a nicer home, right? And slowly and steadily, they moved up the value chain. The other day I was looking for a holiday in Croatia. I found a villa called Villa Shafezadeh. It was 12.5 lakh rupees a night on Airbnb. So there comes a disruptor. And by the way, Airbnb's turnover today is more than the turnover of Four Seasons, the entire SPG group, the entire Le Méridien group, the entire Holiday Inn and the IHG International Hotels group, right? So there comes in a disruptor, bottom end of the pyramid, and disrupts if brick and mortar industry using mobile, right? That's what's happening today. So I think what's going to happen, whether you consider industries of various kinds, over the next 10 years, with this access, disruption is going to be name of the game, right? When I started my career with a company called Sun Microsystems. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of it, right? But it was the holy grail. I thought I was God when I joined that company because to get your first job there, Sun was an acronym for Stanford University Networks. It was the holy grail of computing. And if you go to Facebook headquarters today, that is actually the Sun Microsystems headquarters. So the signs still remain there as a humble reminder of what you need to be doing of remaining humble and paranoid, right? So just correlating this in terms of the world that we're living in. I mean, you know, Rajesh, I'm not too sure whether you should be calling this a digital marketing kind of a conference because I don't believe in that word at all. I think digital marketing is a whole lot of humbug created by companies like Facebook and Google and everyone else around us. It's no longer digital marketing. I speak from the heart when I say this. It's marketing in a digital world, right? Think about it. How much time, I'm going to ask you some questions. How many people in the audience spend more than 2 hours a day watching TV? No one put up their hand. One person, one person.
My husband is already.
Your husband's always on TV, okay? So there are 2 people who watch more than 2 hours a day, right?
Only when there's cricket.
Only when there's cricket, yeah, there you go, right? And half the time when that's happening, you're probably on an app watching it somewhere on the road as well. So, how many of you today, on an average, spend more than 2 hours a day on your mobile phone? That's the whole room. By the way, the India average is about 2.75 hours. Of that, 93% of the time that Indians are on their phone, they're spending it in an app. That's proven data, yeah? So you're not going into a browser and searching for information, you're in an app, right? Whichever app is your favorite app. And interestingly, at the same time, you know how many times you unlock your phone in a day? Take a guess. About 80 to 100 times. The average Indian unlocks it about 80 to 100 times in a day, right? Now what this behavior is driving is some very interesting data. It's a privilege for us to work at Facebook because we tend to think of us as a very large discovery platform. 2 billion people are active on Facebook every day, which we consider a privilege. So we get to see a lot of signals, right? And those signals are everything about you, your phone, your data, your device. We literally can correlate programming of television and during an ad break where you go, do you turn on Facebook, do you go on to something else? There's a lot of data that we have about you, right? And interestingly, when you think about it, I love the fact what Rajan talked about around machine learning because when you think about marketing, in the basics of marketing, we've always said, deliver personal experiences. Make it meaningful, make it relevant, make it personalized, right? And when you think about the world's most personalized product, the most personalized product in the world, can you take a guess at what it is? It's your newsfeed or your Facebook page. Because your Facebook page differs from your Facebook page, differs from your Facebook page. 2 billion Facebook pages are actually different. And that's only possible because of machine learning. So I love that video that Rajan showed, which really is an amalgamation of where I think we're going. Now when you come to mobile behavior, and I'm building a point here, so just stay with me. Today in India, of all e-commerce that's happening in the world, 42% of that e-commerce is happening on mobile only. India is leading the world there. 76% of all buying decisions across most categories are made on the phone prior to that actual purchase happening in store or on any other medium, right? 76% of people engage post buying a product on a mobile platform to share views or to understand how to go about using that product, right? So we're seeing mobile really change the way marketing really needs to happen. And I would argue that in the next 5 years, India would lead mobile marketing. Because what do the Americans know about mobile marketing? With pardon, no prejudice, right? They don't, because that's not the medium of choice or the device of choice in the region. They're not using it the way we're using it in this country. So coming to what I think is going to be the marketer of the future. I think the marketer of the future is going to be a combination of 2 things, right? It's really, earlier if you were in marketing, a lot of people in sales and in finance and in other functions really thought that marketing folks were frivolous, right? And marketing is a whole lot of BS. I would argue that marketing is already and will become the new finance. Marketing is going to drive key decisions for most businesses because marketing is going to give us the ability using systems and data to really define experiences, right? So I see the role of the marketer changing into 2 distinct roles. One is a chief data officer, the other is a chief experience officer. And I think today, why do you go to most products and services have become commodities, right? You're buying an air ticket or you're buying a hotel room, you could buy it anywhere, right? So the reason you go and buy it at a particular portal or at a particular store is because of the experience. So I would argue that experience is the new brand. And customer journeys of how they get to that experience is the new product. And data is the voice of the customer. And content is how we respond to it, right? That whole medium around personalized marketing and having personalized creative is nothing but responding to that data signals, right? In terms of what we're talking about. So the other last 2 points that I'll make and I'll end. In order for us to become chief digital officers or to really become chief data officers, I would argue that measurement is key. And again, I think the digital industry is to blame with a whole lot of humbug and crap that we've created. So I can tell you, if you talk to your teams or yourselves, you will know that we've introduced various metrics along the years. If you want to measure your conversion, look at your CTR rate, right? Look at your CPI or your cost per install. You look at your CPM and your CPMM and your CPA and your CPC. We have confused the industry like crazy. And that is a whole lot of humbug and a whole lot of BS, right? If you really think of what matters to a CEO in the room, and Suresh is going to come up next and talk to you about his vision as a CEO for one of the world's most amazing brands, it really is about real world business outcomes. You've got to measure outcomes. You don't care about what the click-through rate was and what the viewability metric was. It doesn't matter. What matters is, are we moving a real world business outcome? And that business outcome in marketing is largely measured by an impact on your sales or an impact on your brand or key brand metrics, whether it's top of the funnel or middle of the funnel, right? So that's what we're seeing as a role of a key of measurement really changing and why it's getting more people oriented. You know, yesterday was a very, I'll end it on this note by telling you that when it comes, I don't want to talk about Facebook and the examples. I know our teams already are in touch and we deal with most of the audience in this room. But the one thing that was extremely endearing to me yesterday in the morning, if you open up the Times of India, when you get free press, and Suresh, you would know this, when you get free press that is awesome, which is front page press and you had nothing to do with it, it is a specially good feeling, right? So yesterday when I opened the Times of India in the morning, the front page, right on the front jacket, had an article that says, Facebook and WhatsApp together are generating $9 billion worth of sales for housewives in this country. And that's projected to grow to $62 billion by 2020, in the next 4 years. Now, just to put it into estimate, the size of the e-commerce market in 2020 will be $120 billion. So you could argue that the housewives are far more efficient than large companies. Right? In fact, I would argue even one step further that housewives in India have created more wealth than the top 50 companies on our stock exchanges. So it is estimated that the housewives in India have traded over the last 10 years $1.8 trillion worth of wealth through hoarding gold. Right? It's true. I swear, I kid you not. You go to the World Gold Council and they'll give you that number. You add the market cap of the top 50 companies on our stock exchanges, you won't reach 1.8 trillion. Right? So you can actually, and I truly believe that when you think about the bottom of the pyramid, they're innovative, they use jugaad, they find means to get their products and services sold. And I think the housewives is just an illustration, whether it was creating wealth for the economy. Of course, if they came out with that wealth, you could wipe out a lot of our fiscal deficit, you could argue that. But or using technology in an innovative way, right? So I think they really are leading